So we have now had our time with the Elden Ring Network test, and while the network test absolutely blew my expectations away, and the game was way better than I thought it would be, I have to say it wasn't perfect. There are actually quite a bit of things that I think, if not changed, could really damper the experience of this game. So before we get into the problems I have with it, let me preface this video by saying this is not going to be complaining. The entire point of the network test was for us to go in and find problems and issues that they can fix, and give them feedback on those problems, so that in the end Elden Ring turns out to be the best game it can possibly be. So then, with that out of the way, before we get started, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date on all the latest Elden Ring news. This channel is going to be your central hub for all things Elden Ring. Recently we've been breaking down the lore of Elden Ring as we can find it so far, and I gotta say there is some crazy stuff in there, so if you haven't seen those videos, definitely go check those out. So to get through these problems, I want to go in the order of least complex to most complex. And to begin the list, let's start out with some basic glitches. And for that, I'm just talking about stuff not loading in properly, enemies phasing through walls, and stuff like that. And to be completely honest with you, I did not run into a lot of these. However, there were two major ones that I want to point out real quick. The first real glitch I experienced in the network test was after getting Torrent and making my way up to Stormveil Castle. Whenever I arrived at the gate and reached the tunnel leading up to Margit, the entirety of Stormveil Castle was not loaded in. And luckily I didn't step over the edge, but I imagine I would have just fallen into the void and died. Now I also noticed in this exact same session that Melina wasn't loading in either, and so to fix this I simply restarted my game and that fixed everything. As for the second glitch I encountered, it was while I was raiding this caravan. One of the northern mercenary riders was glitched inside the wagon. Now I know this isn't a big deal, I could still kill him, and I do totally see how a glitch like this could happen, especially when you're working with moving objects and a wagon of this size. It's likely he spawned in the path of the wagon and got glitched up in there. Now, these were the only two glitches I encountered. Other than that, it was flawless. They were a little immersion breaking, and in a network test like this, it's important to point stuff like that out. But moving on from that, I want to talk about one of the biggest contentions I had with this network test, and an honest complaint of mine, and that is the plethora of issues with PvP, of which there are a ton. And I want to start with the most broken of them all, backstabs. Backstabs simply don't work in Elden Ring. The only way you're gonna land a backstab in a PvP scenario is on an AFK player, and even then it's not guaranteed. G9 Media made a video breaking down just how broken these backstabs are, and it's to the point where if the other player is performing any kind of action whatsoever, you literally cannot land a backstab. Now it seems to work fine in PvE, but clearly this needs to be fixed in PvP. Now I haven't tested this myself, but according to other people who are more familiar with the glitches in Dark Souls 3 in the past games, apparently every glitch in Dark Souls 3 PvP and the past games has returned in Elden Ring, even the patched ones, and the most prevalent of them being the Estus cancel. Now I never exploited these in the past, so I don't know how they work, but apparently it's still super broken. But aside from those, the biggest issue I had with PvP in this game was what I predicted would be the biggest problem with co-op only invasions, and that is infinite stun locks from a host and phantom on the invader. And this one pretty much ruins the PvP experience. If you are an invader and you get hit at the same time from a host and a phantom, you die. They are able to hit you until their stamina bars run out, and there's nothing you can do about it. And on the flip side, if you're an invader, you only get one hit of stun lock. There are no true combos in this game as an invader. And honestly, if the hosts and phantoms are competent at all, and they know how to gank up on you like that, literally the only way the invader wins is if their stamina bars run out before your health does. So that's gonna have to be fixed in order to have decent PvP in this game. And I will say this doesn't apply to 1v1s, but I still hope it gets fixed. Next up on the list, I want to talk about quite possibly the most broken thing about Elden Ring so far, and that is magic. Magic is so broken right now. If you play Call of Duty, you know how the meta shifts in those games to where everybody's always using the same gun because it's just the best there is. Right now, magic is kinda like that in Elden Ring. The FP cost is so low compared to the speed of the spell and the damage output that there's really not a better option. Now granted, I am lumping all the spells together when I'm talking about this, and there are some that are balanced just like they were in Dark Souls 3. For example, the guy on screen using the little daggers as the homing soul masses, that spell was fine. But the one he's using now, the lightning off the claymore, is virtually impossible to dodge. You have to be watching the caster perfectly, and even then the spell is so fast that out of all of the invasions I did throughout the network test, I only managed to dodge it maybe 2 or 3 times. There are 2 spells that stick out to me as being extremely overpowered, and those are the Beast Claw and Feast Upon Flame. Now when I went up against people using those spells in PvP, especially in a 2v1 situation, I was screwed. There was nothing I can do, because while I was fighting one of them, the other would be sitting off to the side firing those spells that go so fast and take out 75% of my health bar. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if the FP cost was adjusted accordingly, but I can tell you that I was going up against a prophet using Feast Upon Flame. They were able to cast that spell at least 10 times in one fight. And I have heard words of some of the spells that weren't in the network test from reliable insiders, and let me tell you guys, they get even crazier. Now, I don't know what the exact solution should be for this. My stance is that the FP cost should just be higher. I should not be getting hit by 12 Feast Upon Flames and 13 Beast Claw spells that I have to have god tier timing to even dodge in a single invasion. That should not happen. Now, I think Elden Ring is going to differ from Dark Souls in that the game expects you to use magic. Whether that's spells, miracles, pyromancy, or spirit summons, it's clear that the game is built with those in mind. And I don't want them to get nerfed into the ground, I really don't. I just think with a little bit of tuning and a little bit of adjusting, that sweet spot of balance between melee builds and magic builds can be achieved. But let's move on. The final problem I want to talk about today is one that I heard from you guys, but I didn't really experience myself. And it kind of ties back into the magic thing, but when I asked you guys on Twitter what you thought the biggest change that needed to happen was, a lot of you said you felt way too overpowered way too fast, and I think I have an explanation. Personally, I thought the field bosses in Margit were perfectly balanced and amazingly difficult to where it seemed impossible at first, but after some practice, I felt like a better player after beating them. Now, for the dungeon bosses, to me, I felt like they were just harder enemies. They didn't give me that boss feeling. Like you can see with Darrowil, a single R1 took out like 1/10 of his health. So I think the dungeon bosses could use a little bit of an upgrade. But again, I think I do have an explanation for this. When we start the network test, it says we're level 5, but I'm pretty sure a lot of our stats are actually boosted. Now, I have no evidence for this, but clearly, in the PvE, we were doing way too much damage for a level 5 character. And that could also be because we started with a lot of in-game items. I know pretty much everybody picked up the Crucible Axe armor, and that gear is clearly in-game content. But I agree, I did feel overpowered in the dungeon specifically, so maybe those could use an upgrade. But those were my biggest and pretty much only complaints about the network test, and they're not even really complaints. This video was just to provide constructive criticism and my personal opinion about what I believe can be changed to make the game better. But overall, I had an amazing time with the network test. As I said, it exceeded my expectations. However, I think with just a couple more changes, the game could be in that perfect sweet spot. So let me know what you think. What are some changes they could do to make the game even better? And what were some complaints, if you had any, about the network test? Anyways though, that's going to pretty much do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on it, and subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you in the next one.